business minds and thought leaders share the secrets to success. Welcome to Call Me Successful.
We're very excited to have with us Steve Mutton. Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Avi.
Mate, I was at the awards night on Thursday with Ray White, and I noticed that you're one of the Max White winners, which is one of the most prestigious prizes in the Ray White network.
Well, I am. I was a Max White winner in 2004. I like to say I was probably one of the youngest ones to win the Max White prize back then, but certainly an honour to be part of that group.
Yeah, wow, 2004. So how did this journey start? Where did you start your real estate career, and was it always with Ray White?
Look, I started in Coffs Harbour, northern New South Wales, in 1992, believe it or not, that long ago. I started with an independent. I was with an independent agency for 3-4 months, and actually started in property management as a letting clerk. And then, I was recruited into Ray White Coffs Harbour, where I was an agent there for 3.5 years. Absolutely loved the training. So from day dot, I absorbed everything I could that Ray White had to offer. Went down the auction method of sale and really soaked that up. And I was fortunate enough to, within 2 years, be Ray White's #1 auction lister in New South Wales with 96 auctions.
Yeah, in 1992, auction focused back then.
Back then.
So what made you move from Coffs Harbour to the Gold Coast? Is it after 3 years in there?
So 3 years were there. No, it was actually decided I wanted to actually get into corporate. I'd seen so much of the training within Ray White and been very fortunate to have some of the best trainers around in the early 90s. And took a job in Ray White Corporate Queensland under Peter Camphon. And my role there was to do state training, worked with Phil Parker and Dwight Ferguson. And I was fortunate enough that I was given the Gold Coast and Far North Queensland as my dedicated offices. And obviously working so close with the Gold Coast, such a big sell and big and active part of the Ray White network. I was, recruited during my tenure. I was only in Ray White Corporate Queensland for 9 months. And recruited by Gary Gannon to join his Broadbeach and Mermaid business.
So this was before when Ray White wasn't as big in the Gold Coast as it is now. This is
it wasn't as big in number of offices.
Yeah.
Certainly the dominance in market share. You got to think, the Andrew and Greg Bell, Gary Gannon really controlled that Gold Coast market. Very auction focused, bitter rivals, but it was just an absolutely thriving business.
And the great man, Peter Camphon himself, he was a CEO back then?
Yeah, he was Queensland CEO and still a great mentor of mine. I catch up with Peter, monthly, and took a lot of my business direction from Peter's directorship and mentorship.
So we're going to talk about this a lot, but there seems to be in your career, like you're in business, in a real estate agency, then you go back to corporate, then you come back to real estate. That's kind of been your guiding light in a way that you go and help someone do something else and you say, I'm going to go back and build my own business, which is where it's led to you now. Yeah. But how did this business owner journey start for you? Because going from corporate to then owning businesses, did you go back to selling or did you say, I'm going to just go and buy offices and I'm going to make this happen?
Yeah, so when I was with Ray White Corporate Queensland, Gary Gannon was expanding from Broadbeach, opening his second office in Mermaid. He needed a sales manager, so I joined Gary as a sales manager and did that for 6 months. And then eventually my wife and I bought Ray White Mermaid Beach off Gary. And that was where the journey started. We started with 3 salespeople. My wife is the accounts and property manager. And for the next couple of years, we just built that like crazy. I mean, I had some great real estate agents, Scott Wagner, Joanna Bell Booth, who are, were very, very, prominent agents on the Gold Coast. And we built a great business out of Mermaid. It was the heart of the Gold Coast, I used to say. But the best thing about that period back then was my neighbouring Ray White offices, were my #1 competition. And that drove me and my team to actually perform better, to perform more, I suppose, than what the market was offering us.
So from a standing start, 3 agents.
Yep.
How did you do that? How did you build that? Like, what was different about you? Because your competitors are the bigger Ray Whites around you. But how did you go on? And I think 6 or 7 offices you went to at one stage. Yeah. From a standing start to 6 or 7 offices, what space of time did that take you?
Well, we had Mermaid Beach for approximately 4 years. And then the next 3 years after that, we opened another 5 offices.
Yeah, wow.
And we went from our team of 8 up to well over 100 agents, or if you add in their associates and that, we're hitting about 120 people in that sales division across the 6 offices. That took a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of change in the way that I became as a leader. When we had the one office, I could, focus about myself and my own sales and, be able to distribute my time with, with my 2 or 3 key people. As the offices grew, it was a big learning curve of how to actually distribute my leadership, my time, my efforts across all of those offices.
So were you still selling, Steve?
No, I stopped selling. Once I started expanding, I stopped selling.
So this is what we're going through. The business owners are all talking about this now. When do we stop selling?
Yeah.
Like what's the answer? Is there one answer?
I don't think there is the right answer. The only thing is I made a very clear decision that I would stop, and I had to recruit like anything. But, I've got a great saying that's stuck with me for, 25 odd years, and that is culture over commission. So when we did start recruiting, it was always culture over commission. And that was the mantra of our offices. And I'd like to think the mantra of our success of the 6 offices, we are a very unified group.
So did you come across instances where the culture didn't meet commission?
Yeah, I did, and that was always a tough conversation to be able to have with someone that had amazing culture. But I've actually seen it recently, and I won't go into in depth it now. But someone that I've joined in our organisation now, amazing culture, but all of a sudden it's just clicked for him, and they've taken off. So sometimes you persevere more with culture to get them to a point where it's sometimes that heavy commission that can disrupt the business. You've just got to be careful with.
How many hard calls did you have to make in the early days? Did you get rid of agents based on the culture?
I've always operated under the belief of the 3 R's of real estate. You recruit, you retain, you renew. Sometimes that renew's got to be removed, but it is, first of all, recruitment. Second is retention. What are you doing to retain your staff? And then thirdly, as I said, around that renewing, that's training. So look, we did recruit hard, and it was all performance-based. But you got to understand that the leadership styles in the late 90s into the 2000s are a lot different to what they are now. It was more around KPIs. It was around, you do this or you moved on. Now it's more accepting and finding, how you have that common ground with individuals. And I'm sure you would have seen in your journey the fact that leadership has changed over the last, especially since COVID, especially since people have got more access to, data, more access to platforms. Your leadership style changes.
And that's kind of how we met as well, because we were kind of competitors in a way,
Yep.
and we were adversaries, friendly ones, but
Yes.
You were trying to recruit my staff, and it's all good. It happens in business, and I was trying to recruit some of yours. It happens. Yep. But people said, I'm like, who's the Steve guy? Because, I'm relatively new, 10 years in the industry. And they're like, mate, yeah, he knows how to recruit. He knows how to recruit. So how do you recruit? Like what made you so effective? Because getting people to change from one agency to the other, it's quite difficult. People think it's simple when they go into real estate, but it's quite a difficult task.
Look, it is difficult. It's all about relationships, and never be sitting there in front of people. I don't want to give away all my secrets, but never sitting there recruiting for your own self. I'm a passionate believer, and I was saying to you before, we're in the business of real estate. We're not optometrists. And one of the best lines that Peter Camfin always told me, we're not optometrists. It's not I. The best leaders are always about you. And that's where I've seen the biggest part of my learning curve was transitioning from a successful salesperson to what I thought was a successful leader is the direction of how I have to change my own belief. When you're a successful salesperson, it's about you and the goals you're trying to achieve. When you're a successful leader, as you've seen, it's about your team. And transitioning away from understanding your role on a daily basis is about the people standing in front of you rather than the person you're looking at in the mirror.
But there's so many people that don't make that connection though, Steve. And you've coached a lot of people who haven't.
Yeah.
How do you coach those people? How do you make them see that it's not just about your commission, your sales, your number of sales and everything? Because I go around some of my areas and I see competitors who are principals, billboards, bus stops, and then I see nothing from their agents. Like what do you say to those people? Like how does Steve Mutton coach them?
It's an individual relationship, and that's why everything's about the relationships that I'm now forming with my new business and even the relationships I've had in my previous business. It's about finding that unique, connection between you and that agent, or you and that EBU team, and being able to emphasise the capabilities and the parts that individual can do quite well. I always say when someone's looking at creating or building their team or creating an EBU, let's find what you do well, and let's find what you struggle at, and then let's emphasise what you do really well. And if we can start focusing on that, and that's where every part of my conversations is when I build relationships, is finding out what you do well And whereas I, as a leader, as a mentor, as a trainer, can help you fill those voids that either you don't like doing or you're not good at. And I think it's continually asking questions. I think too many people talk about what they've done in the past, but they don't sit there and ask the question of the person sitting in front of them. I've been in some recruitment meetings where I've had to sort of tap people under the table and say, well, it's not about us, it's about that person there. And when you can actually, the old saying is people don't care how much you know when they know how much you care. That's stuck in my mind from the day I started real estate.
That's this journey with Ray White in the Gold Coast.
Yep.
6, 7, 8 offices, dominated 100 agents. And then after that, you decide to go into corporate. So this is when the LJ Hooker journey comes in.
Yep.
So why do you go to LJ Hooker? What made you go back to corporate?
Look, I sold my real estate business in 2008. I'd like to think now, or I say that I predicted the GFC, but it just happened that way. I then did some project marketing on the Gold Coast where we project managed, a couple of thousand properties, and I did that independently. And then the opportunity arose to join LJ Hooker, and that was as a Queensland BDM. So, as an office recruiter for them. And look, LJ Hooker's always been close to my heart. My great uncle started LJ Hooker Coffs Harbour in 1973. I nearly bought the LJ Hooker business when I was in that transition from Ray White to joining Ray White Queensland. And look, it had always been part of growing up. So when the opportunity arose, I took it. And LJ Hooker, like Ray White and like a couple of the other brands, is synonymous for real estate. People know what LJ Hooker and Ray White are when you mention the name. But look, I joined them as a Queensland BDM and did that for 18 months, 2 years. And then my role just sort of evolved and expanded really quickly. I was lucky to have the support of, back then the network chief, Graham Hyde, a guy called Ben Mitchell, who was, done a lot with Ray White down in the southern coast of New South Wales. And they backed and supported me, and I moved on to be Queensland State CEO and also ran Victoria, then General Manager of Australia, and then General Manager of the network for the last 2.5 years.
I was glad when you moved on from the Queensland role. What I did observe about you, and I looked at LinkedIn a lot, is just you're pretty much living in an airport, right? There was very much like Queensland and New South Wales and New Zealand and Tasmania. How do you do that?
Look, the last 2.5 years certainly took its toll, and that was one of the deciding factors that, to get back into my own business. The travel was just horrendous, especially my family, even though I've been married for 28 years and 2 lovely grown up daughters. But the travel was horrendous and it took my toll. But look, there wouldn't be a day that I'd say I didn't enjoy the role. I always come back and say all real estate is a transformation of enthusiasm. And I think, if I look at anything, that's one of the factors that I bring to the table every day. It's that energy. I quite often say my real age is this, but my energy age is, I'm in my early 30s and I've got a lot of energy there. So
yeah, wow, watch out, everyone in the Gold Coast. So my question follow up to that is, what's the difference between, say, recruiting an agent as opposed to recruiting a business? Do you do things differently, the same? What's the difference in there?
Look, I actually don't think it's differently because, my transition over the last 5 weeks of, leaving my previous corporate role to getting back into my own business, the conversations are the same. How can I actually benefit and make that person's job easier and get them to the, the goals and the desires and outcomes that they want? As I said before, I'm a big believer of asking questions. You can never ask enough of questions. And the more questions I can ask and then, actually zip my mouth, listen to the answers, and then come up with a plan that's going to work with that individual or that business, is what creates a success.
So what were the strengths of the LJ Hooker network when you were there?
Look, LJ Hooker, as I said, is synonymous for real estate. The efforts, and I remember having many a conversation with the White family in the late 90s, early 2000s, saying we wanted to be on TV, LJ Hooker, and that they were on TV continually. That's a legacy that still lasts very, very strong for them. The difference, I suppose, now coming back to why Ray White, well, look, I'm based on the Gold Coast. I had such a successful, in-depth business on the Gold Coast with Ray White. And I'd like to actually say the main reason why I'm back at Ray White is I've joined the Burgess family. I had to find a partner and a family that I could actually work well with. And Scott and Grant Burgess are that. I mean, they've created an amazing business, as you know, over the last 18 years. And now for them, it's a lease of energy coming back into their business. And we've got some great ambitions. The platforms that I must say that, being away from Ray White for, a good part of a decade, the technology that's available is unbelievable. But that technology is only as good as the individual or the office leader. And that's something that I've challenged, even having a look at myself about some of the data and raw insights coming out of our business at Ray White Robina, is if we actually access and took advantage of what's in front of us, it's a game changer.
So I read the press article when it was released that you're joining Ray White. I am a huge admirer of Scott Burgess, as you know. He's been in the industry for so long and did things the integrity way, like is taking care of his people. Do you think that our industry is kind of losing that focus a bit? Because looking at what you're doing with Scott Burgess, I think many leaders, and especially in the Gold Coast, have kind of gone the other way, where you look at from the outside and you're like, this doesn't seem right.
Look, I think one of the best things about joining Scott and Grant, and that is look, it is their integrity. The tenure of people in their business that are over 10 years is phenomenal. They're both very humble individuals, and I think the platform and the culture that they've created, is second to none. So look, I'm very pleased the fact that I've joined that business. It's an amazing business, and yes, Scott and I, and I deal with Scott on a daily basis on that leadership level. We are completely different, but we also understand where we're going, what part of the journey we're going to play in this role.
So coming back to technology, you've mentioned the Ray White technology is above and beyond in your press release as well. Why is it so different to the other networks? Like, what do you think? It's just the development has not been there, or the focus hasn't been there?
I don't know if it's the focus or you actually look at it, being led by a fourth generation white family, they know the real estate industry. They know this franchising business. The investment that they've been able to put back into the company, I think, is unrivaled. I mean, it's the resources that they've got, and the fact that they understand the pressure points all the way through. They know where to invest to drive and bring it through. So, people like Mark McLeod, the stuff that he's created in the back and Nurture Cloud, like it's blown my mind away. But I think it's understanding that we're being led by real estate people, and it's their family business. And they have one thing that they want to do, and that's protect their family. And we're part of that.
So when people open up businesses, they always have these inner sort of fire that I'm going to change the industry. I'm going to change how real estate is done in my area. What's your inner fire about Ray or Robina? What do you want to change? Or is it little changes, subtle things? Or what's your inner ambition of changing things in the industry in Robina marketplace? Yeah,
look, I've had a burning desire for a long time to raise the bar of our industry. Nothing annoys me more than some of these self-proclaimed, posts that you see there about, the achievements. Look, I'm all for, yes, we've got to echo out how good we are, but I'm about changing, 1,000 things by that 1%. If we can keep chipping away and improving. For me, really, it's about that journey of the customer. And the customer for you and I as leaders, it's our people. How do we actually find and take them on the path that they want to maximise their enjoyment? I've been doing a lot of work in the last 4 or 5 weeks with our property management team. And I want it to be an enjoyable experience for them to come to work, irrespective of the challenges. And that's my goal at the moment, is how do we create an enjoyable environment where people can succeed and thrive to the level that they want. And I think if we look at the leadership styles that have changed from, the early 90s or the late 90s when I became a leader to now, it's actually making people achieve what they want, not what you and I want. It doesn't matter what you and I want. If we actually get in tune with what our people want, the sky's the limit.
And then more people will join you. That's your mentality.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I mean, it's, so much of what an agent does at the level of, if the only thing you ever do is to list that property and sell it, well, then you're a fool. If the only thing I'm to do is to recruit one person and I don't get opportunities outside of that one person, then I haven't done my job right. I mean, the people that we bring into our business should be our biggest advocates. They're the ones that should be out there helping us grow.
And what do you do with people that are not your advocates in your business?
Look, I think it's finding out what that blockage is. There's always a common reason why you're getting pushback. And I think when you can take people on the journey to understand that, hey, you're there to help them, you're there to push them, but only to the level they want to be pushed. And I think that's where I said the biggest change in my leadership is identifying what people want to achieve in their own goal, and then making sure that I add up all these individuals, and that'll come to where I'm going to go with my business.
We spoke about the multi-office setup. what's the goal with Ray White Robina? Is it going to be 4 or 5 offices? Where is Steve Mutton taking Ray White Robina?
No, look, obviously growth, and I'm a strong believer of people should have the right to work for the leader that they believe that they're going to be in sync with, and that leader that's going to take them to the levels that they want to achieve. I think, especially since COVID, the playing field's changed. We can service a greater distance from one platform. And I know we were chatting before we hopped on air. If I had my time again, I wouldn't have 6 locations because that's 6 sets of costs. Technology's changed. We can do business in a greater area, but it just comes down to creating those platforms and creating the relationships. And once again, it goes back to administration. You've got to have that support. And part of our onboarding, we have a 3-pronged onboarding strategy now, and I won't go into giving away too many of the secrets, but one is management and leadership. What are we going to do for you? The other is administration, and the next is marketing. They're the 3 areas of pain points that agents have. How do we actually reduce the downtime for them in their transition period to make sure that they succeed? So from management leadership, to administrational support to marketing.
So this brings me to my next question. Where is the industry going in terms of marketing, social media? Where do you think it's headed? Because you're very well placed to answer that question because you've traveled all of Australia, all of New Zealand. You've seen the most successful agencies, depending on Alger Hooker, Ray White. Yeah. Where is it all going? When do we stop with this marketing, social media?
Yeah, look, I don't think it is going to stop. I mean, I think we're seeing obviously from transitions from the Gold Coast Bulletin being over 100 pages and advertising property to virtually non-existent there now. More and more activities happening on social, and you can become a star pretty quickly. As we're seeing a couple of these young guns in Ray White now. Their followings and their reach to people. Social media allows you to reach a far greater area than what we've done in the past. And that's where I think we're not going to be geographically, bound now by where we sell and become leaders. People will, one of my staff the other day sold a block of land in Early Beach and we're located in Robina. I mean, you wouldn't have thought about that 10 years ago.
Yeah, just insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
A couple of questions before we finish, Steve. What's your definition of success?
Look, I think being able to go home and actually, smile and know that you've done it, made a difference in the day, whether it's to the people that come up and trust you in their livelihoods, or being able to go home and say, I've made a difference to my family. But success is not just about the results. Success, I think it's well within. You've got to be happy with what you do. And as much as I love the travelling, as much as I was passionate about my previous role, I miss the locality of being based on the Gold Coast. And, the energy now that I've got, is through the roof. My wife, my 2 daughters, can't believe, that this is the person that I am again. And I think success comes from, being energized. And that, to me, it's not just financial. It's being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I've made a difference.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. We've really enjoyed the chat today. Amazingly successful in a corporate career, amazingly successful building your businesses in the Gold Coast, and we can't wait to see what you get done in the next 4 or 5 years.
Fantastic, Avi. And look, one of the things I've thoroughly enjoyed about you and our relationship is neither of us are limited to what we want to hand out and give back to the industry. I love seeing the industry improve, whether you're Ray White, whatever colour, and the more we can help people, the more it raises the bar for us. So, mate, thanks very much.
Thank you.